Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So, I just zeroed a couple of rifles again because there was a temperature change enough for this. And because of the temperature change, okay, come out, change zero, zeros probably changed, go out there, confirm them, that kind of shit. But right before I was getting ready to do some practice in friggin' armor and whatnot, because I still have to deal with the big green weenie, a thought occurred to me. And it's one of those things that kind of dawns on you that I should have done a video on a long time ago. When I got guys that come out to class, when we get ready to go zero our rifles, we talk about getting your natural point of aim a lot. And the issue with that is, dude, there's a lot of guys that just had never even heard the concept before, right? And it's one of those things that strikes you in that, maybe it's just familiarity poisoning for the most part, where it's like you've been around it so long that you see that kind of stuff and you're just like, what the fuck, how do you not? But that's sort of an ignorant view on my part. So I figure one good way to help guys out so they can show up, if they know how to zero their rifles, they can go ahead and figure out what kind of zero that they're going to use, and then they can come out to class and all that shit. One of those things that just helps guys out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and talk about setting up natural point of aim. Now, there are a lot of ways that I've seen this particular talking point, quote unquote, be done really, really wrong. One of those things that turns out to be very misleading for a lot of folks. And for me personally, there are a lot of specifics that I think you really need to get down in order to set your natural point of aim correctly. You're going to have to just excuse the wind. It's that time of year again. So, with regards to natural point of aim, there are a lot of little specifics that a lot of guys get either incorrect, or they don't know the specifics because, they're teaching rifle PMI at their units, and it's because they've been selected. They never really done this shit before. I've seen a lot of guys end up having to teach it. They don't even shoot expert regularly or whatever the fuck, So, here's a bunch of things that we can go ahead and absorb and use for future stuff. Now, first and foremost, setting your natural point of aim. What is that? Now, as far as setting your natural point of aim, it's one of those deals where, as dudes most of the time, or as guys that wear green suits or cops or whatever, right, we're really used to making shit work, right? Like, if things aren't set up perfectly, we're really used to having to just deal with it, make something happen, and roll with the punches. This is not one of those times, because in the words of Travis Haley, if you don't have a solid zero, you don't have shit, right? So if we're going to go ahead and zero our rifles, let's talk about what natural point of aim actually is and how to set up into it. What a natural point of aim is the second that you set up and shoulder that rifle, what influence does your body have over the rifle currently, right? And usually it's kind of backwards. A lot of times I hear guys talking about how natural point of aim is how to set up to where you're pointing the gun in the direction that you want to. And yeah, that's the end goal, but what it really means, and there's little specifics that a lot of guys tend to not give a fuck about, but little specifics are really important when we're talking about a solid zero. So what it really is when you line up behind a rifle, what is your body doing that influences the gun, right? How it is when you naturally line up behind the gun, what does your body tend to do, right? Depending on how your shoulder's torqued in there and the body position that you're in. Sometimes it's the crane of the back, depending on the terrain that you're in and that kind of thing. So setting up a solid NPA is setting up into a position to where your natural body tendencies, while lined up behind the gun, don't influence the gun off of target. Does that make sense? So here's how we're going to go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of shots, one with a solid NPA and the other without, in both the prone and a sitting position, and you can see the difference between the two. Because having a solid natural point of aim generally means that when you line up behind the gun, your body is naturally lined up behind the rifle to where there's no influence on the gun that pushes it off of target. Which generally means if you fire the rifle, because of how it's situated in your body, it ends up pointed right back at the target afterwards, right? So, again, I'm going to go ahead and set up into a solid natural point of aim in both the prone and the sitting position, and there's going to be a couple of shots with a solid NPA and a couple of shots without, and we're going to see how that works. Now, you may have noticed something while I'm in this position here. The first set was with a natural point of aim, and the second set was without one. Now, the first thing that we point to as far as having a good natural point of aim and that kind of stuff is if you have a solid position behind a rifle, one of the bigger benefits of having a natural point of aim is that the gun returns to target because your gun is pointed in the direction of that target and your body is naturally lined up behind it to the point where at rest the rifle is in the direction that you want to go and it won't come off of it because of how your body is oriented. If it is not oriented behind a rifle in such a way to where your body weight and all that shit is naturally setting behind it, what's going to happen is the rifle itself is going to want to go to that natural point of rest after you press the trigger, right? So if you don't have a solid natural point of aim, what ultimately results in that, while picking up this point, right, this individual one, is that you have to spend more time off the focus form fundamentals part, right? So instead of me just having to sit there and go through proper sight alignment, proper sight picture, and real solid trigger control, adding the techniques of breathing and all that other shit in there, what I now have to do after every shot is adjust my position. And the annoying part about this is that if you do not have a natural point of aim, and sometimes you're just not able to get one, but we're not even talking about the zeroing portion, we're talking about stuff outside of that. However, what you end up having to do a lot of is readjusting, getting back into where the gun is on target now, and what that is ultimately is inconsistent with what it is that you're trying to do. You'll notice that when we're talking about like the sitting position or any other position that's straight up off the ground, without a natural point of aim, it is just influenced even more, right? On the ground, you just jolt a little bit and you can settle back in there and do what you got to do. The further up you go, right, the more your body is influenced by that, because you have sub-explosion energy trying to take the path of least resistance. And what's kind of cool about this is that if you have a solid natural point of aim, and because it was nice and tall and well, not nice and tall, but seeing as it was a little bit higher off the ground, and the fact that I'm a real noodly fuck, what's real nice to see as far as just like a demo type purpose is with a solid NPA in this position, you notice that all of my body weight and that kind of shit naturally settled the rifle back down before the reset of the trigger. It just settled itself back into place, no big deal. However, without that solid natural point of aim, I have to adjust the entire rifle, get it set, get it ready to go, and then go ahead and press the trigger. So, again, that kind of further pushes on that first point that I was making about having a solid natural point of aim. Now we're going to get into the other point that is to be made that can actually influence your zeros to the point where you can think that you're zeroed, but you're not. So let's go ahead and get on that. Alright, so let's go ahead and have ourselves a little talk here, right? Now, the second main point on establishing a natural point of aim is to make sure that there is as minimal human input on the gun itself as we're using it. And what's kind of fucked up about this is that a lot of times when people have a natural torque in the gun and they don't correct it, they just try to make shit work, eventually that muscle tension starts to wane. And it produces a number of different problems. Number one, that forced muscle tension tends to start to give way, especially if you've been in a position for a while, taking a while to take the shot and that kind of thing. So as far as its consistency, it's not very much in the way of consistency. Number two, if you have a natural torque, what you can end up doing is, as you're setting your sights on that target, and as you're pressing the shot, a lot of times people tend to release that tension as they're pressing the shot, so the gun is torqued now in the direction that it wanted to in the first place. You fire the shot and you figure that you're further off to the left or right or whatever than you actually are. So then you start making adjustments. And then after a while, you line up behind the gun again, you accidentally stumble into a good natural point of aim, and now the sights are off when you should have been zeroing from that solid position to start. Okay, just about everybody here has had that first set of shots that they fired, right? Especially if guys were like new to this or whatever the fuck, where they feel real solid, right? And then when they get behind the gun following that, something just feels off, something feels weird, right? However minor, you lining up behind that rifle is now different and you noticed. You see what I'm saying? So the big thing here is to try and figure out exactly how to make sure you get in behind the gun as consistently as possible so that A, you don't get that feeling, okay, and B, there's a little more confidence in how well you individually can place a shot. And third, it is just all around more consistent, right? So the way that I've been taught this for a really long time was to set the rifle down first, get on your knees, frickin' like you're standing up, you get on your knees, you line up right behind the rifle, which is pointed at your target currently, right? Now this isn't a bad way to go about it, it really isn't, because once you've got that lined up, now you can pick the gun up, start to shoulder it, and you can immediately figure out what it is that your gun is doing. Now, picking this guy up and just putting it into the pocket of my shoulder, immediately I'm lined up way in the fuck to the left. Okay, so what we can do with this is we can take this information and apply it to our own bodies, because all you really end up having to do is take your support hand and you're going to move your entire body with the gun until you're lined up. And now that I'm lined up, what's kind of cool about this is that I can set to where I can do several things that'll help me out. Number one, I can load my magazine as if I'm loading a bipod. You see me do it, right? Now, here's the thing. Right now, my windage is good, but I'm low of the target that I want to go ahead and shoot at. You can either push into the gun, like this way, with your own shoulders, to where you get the elevation to get set. Or, if I'm too high, like I am now, what I can do is I can take my heels, or correction, my toes, push into the ground, pick my body up off the ground, and then settle into the gun after that. What's kind of cool is, and this is why I personally prefer this method, is that as you're settling into the rifle, you can push the whole thing forward until it settles on where you want it. Now the cool thing about this right here is that as I sit right now, I have a natural amount of body weight pushed into the gun. There's no muscle tension on it whatsoever. Like, there's no tension in my heels, my toes, nothing. And I'm set as far as elevation and windage on the target area itself. Other than, obviously, the gun bobbing around because I'm sitting here jaw jacking. Right? So, the next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and establish whether or not I have a natural point of aim without my support hand on the gun, and I'll explain why here. But here's essentially what I do. I don't go into like 500 freaking breathing cycles. What I end up doing is I'll line the sights up, get a good deep breath in, me personally, I mouth breathe like a retard. And once I'm centered up, I will close my eyes and do the exact same thing. So, hold on, let me go through the whole cycle, because I'm moving the gun all over the place with my fucking face. Alright, and I'm on target now. What's kind of cool about this is that if you're off a little bit, like let's say that I was high left or high right, what you can do then is that you can use that tension that you pushed into the magazine with your body weight, and you can take your hands and you can slightly move yourself around, left or right. Now remember, your whole body's got to go with the gun, because if you're just moving the gun and trying to make shit work, the body's going to want to torque it back to where it felt like it was natural before. Now, this is without the support hand. And the main reason why it's without the support hand is because you'd be amazed how much torque people add to their guns simply by grabbing onto it. Simply by grabbing onto it, you can add so much more force either this way or that way, depending on how your hands start relieving stuff. So what I end up doing is I just set my hands in place. If there's tension in there, it's only enough tension to make sure that my hands don't slide back and forth on the rifle. So I'm not really gripping the gun, I'm just touching it enough to where it's not going to move all over the place when I fire the rifle. And after that, we'll go through that breathing cycle again. And there we go. You don't necessarily need like 800 breathing cycles and that kind of thing. You also don't need to be pointed perfectly at the target, right? But the rule of thumb for me is that if I'm over 2 to 3 inches off of what it is that I intend to shoot, I'm going to start shifting my whole body around. Now, some of you may notice that my thumb isn't wrapped around this pistol grip in a traditional sense, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to lefty so that you guys can see this easier. Which means I got to set this whole thing up again. Now, here's the thing, right? Holy shit, this is so much faster, lefty. Alright, there we are. Now here's the thing. By simply gripping onto this pistol grip, we can end up adding a lot of extra torque onto the gun itself. Simply by what we use to tighten up as we start to use our trigger fingers to press through the trigger pull weight. Now, if you have a military style trigger that's 5.5 pounds, anything over like 2, 3-ish, you start to add torque to your hand. Essentially to start adding a little more ass behind the finger that you're trying to use. So here's the deal. Right? As far as just pressing through it is concerned, if we start to add torque just to these two fingers right here, right, just these two, you can see what happens to the gun when my thumb is wrapped around the pistol grip. See what I'm saying? We can add that extra torque, and we don't want that. So here's what we can do to mitigate that as much as possible and help ourselves at the same time, is just by throwing this thumb out, right? We throw this thumb out, and what can happen is, let's say that there again, I'm adding that torque. There is some there, but it's less. And that's what we want. We want as little human input as possible on this shot. So, once we lined everything up... Nope, lefty. I'm on the right-handed only sauce, so I gotta stay consistent with that. But, once we line this up, and there it is again. You can see me setting up, getting my entire body behind the gun. There it is. And from that point, you can see how little the gun moves in this position. It just snaps right back on a target. And that's literally all that is. When we're talking about setting up taller positions and that kind of thing, your natural point of aim is even more important, because then outside factors start to influence that quite a bit more. You are a water-filled bag supported by sticks, so the higher up you go, the more that an unnatural position or a non-aligned position, quote-unquote, is going to affect you. So yeah, I mean, like, the cool thing about this is it's hard for, like, the abrupt jump cut, like my camera cut itself off. But the cool thing about this is that it gives you a real good understanding of what's going on with your body, and you can tweak yourself. And it starts with zeroing, but a lot of times guys will get this like immediately because they're a little more conscious of what's going on with your body, how certain muscles are getting torqued, that kind of thing. And what's great about that is that as you start to do this, you can start setting up like hasty NPAs and that kind of thing. Because let's say that you don't have the time to go through the whole breathing cycles, eyes shut, eye open, get the friggin' support hand in there, eyes shut, friggin' do the breathing and all that shit again. What it starts making you very aware of is how your body is torqued up, or how it just lays, to the point where you can set up a solid NPA pretty fast, right? Now, me personally, just because I'm looking for that extra like 0.5%, I still go through the cycles and that kind of stuff when I'm zeroing a rifle, right? But if I'm friggin' paddle boating about and then I stop and I have to shoot further away, understanding what your body feels like and what it takes to kind of load yourself into a position and set everything up, you can do that with haste and get yourself more or less a fairly solid natural point of aim in seconds, rather than having to take the whole like half minute to 2 minutes setting that up right there, right? So realistically speaking, I mean, and what I show is like good or bad examples of a solid NPA or natural point of aim and a not solid natural point of aim. You guys saw in the footage yourselves, it isn't that big of a difference. It's not huge, but it's just enough to make you a little bit better. And that's really the point, you know, of treating this like a friggin' martial art and that kind of stuff. It's striving for that extra little tiny itty bitty advantage, that extra little thing that makes you a little bit better, because all that shit kind of, you know, coalesces into a bigger thing, you know, once you get everything added together, you know. So you know, let me know what you guys think. Is this the first time that you've heard of setting up a natural point of aim? Is this the first time that you've heard of the way that I go about it? I'd love to friggin' know in the comment section, that kind of stuff below. And there again, even if you saw this and you're just kind of like, I don't know, I kind of need somebody to like poke and prod at me and make sure that I'm doing everything right. Just so happens I run a training company too. You guys can come out to class and that kind of thing, and we don't just cover an NPA, but we do all kinds of other shit. But we spend a good deal of time at the very beginning of this 2-day 1,400 round class making sure you got a fairly tight zero, because again, if you don't have a solid zero, you don't have shit. So, irons or optics, we make it happen. We got a lot of stuff on our schedule. I just added another class to that schedule. Also in Kentucky, it's a couple of hours north of me. Out at Down Zero Gun Club. So that's a pistol 1 and 2 class towards in March, right? But there's a whole lot of other shit, like the marathon classes are going up, and I'll have a video explaining in depth what that is. Friggin' a lot of stuff at this range where we got a whole football field, no limitations, that kind of stuff. Dedicated AK class. Friggin' I'm gonna start letting you guys know what's going to go on as far as the travel classes and that kind of thing, because again, I still want to go back out to Montana, I still want to go back to Louisiana and that kind of shit. So I'll let you guys know what's going on with that. Check the link in the description below for all the stuff that we have going on. The website got updated and the user interface is far less complicated than it was before. It's very point and shoot type stuff, which is much easier. And it's chronologically ordered as far as when the classes are coming out, that kind of shit. So, way easier on that front. If you want to buy a hat from us, in our previous video I was talking about hats that we sell and that kind of thing, and I'm going to end up getting one myself. I'm just waiting on my distributor to get me a hat and I can start wearing my fucking hat. But we sell those too if you want to support us. Link in the description below also. If you just want to support us and support what we're doing as far as bringing in soldiers, training them up for free, that kind of thing. We have the Patreon thing set up. If you don't give a rat's ass about that, but you want to train with us super duper cheap, for $35 a month, you can train with us as much as you want, so long as you sign up to that $35 a month thing. And I have guys on like well over a dozen, going for 2 dozen classes and shit based off of that alone. It's a system designed to be abused for the dedicated, that kind of thing. If you want to, sign up for that and just abuse the shit out of it. That's what it's made for. Also, the offer still stands, by the way. If you're watching this and you're a teacher and you're allowed to carry a gun in the classroom, I will train you for free forever. Just shoot me an email. Okay, you can find my email on my website. Again, link for that is in the description below. Also, if you're a school resource officer, again, the offer still stands, guys. I've trained a couple of cops since I put out that that offer. School resource officers, again, I'm training you for free forever. So if you're down like a clown to take advantage of that, you train with us tuition free for like ever. You just got to supply your own ammo and guns and that kind of shit. And even in the guns department, if we have an issue with that, hook up with me and we'll get that rolling. And if you just want to support us so that you can help us do all of that shit, as well as the remaining money that we don't use for the soldier program and that stuff, we use towards bullets and shit so that we can do reviews and that kind of stuff. A bunch of those reviews are coming out, by the way. MP 2.0 Compact, P10C from Jaegerworks, Occult, EOTech, a bunch of other shit is getting reviewed. I promise you a lot of this stuff is happening, including like an Emperor Scorpion and that kind of stuff. So, is what it is. But I'm gonna quit jaw-jacking. You guys have a good day. And remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.